Well, good morning and welcome back to our Creativity and Innovation class, Management 453. Today what we're going to do is we're going to be taking a look at the next I, the second I in our venture. We're going to be looking at the word ignite. Ignite. Under ignite I have a couple of topics where I have an introduction. I have talking about the igniter profile, some strengths of igniters, some weaknesses or challenges of managing igniters, and how to communicate as well as to manage with them, what to say, what not to say, what to do, and what not to do. Then I'm going to talk about the Ignite skills that we have, and then I'm going to conclude by talking about the Ignite mindset. Again, if you take a look at the way that our author structures her chapters, this structure for this I is not unlike the structure that we had for the prior I and for the next 4 I's to come. So let's start off with this introduction. And under the introduction, I have 3 points to raise. The first is just this stage, this introductory stage, this Ignite stage. This has about 3 characteristics you want to take a look at. During this stage, you want to generate lots of ideas, and particularly you want to ignite interest in them. You want to generate lots of ideas, and particularly you want to ignite interest in them. And another thing about this stage, another characteristic of this stage, you want to continuously seek new knowledge. Whatever you're doing, what's new. Let's try to make whatever we have. Let's make it better. And then the last of the characteristics of this stage is you want to challenge your ways of thinking. Excuse me. You want to challenge your ways of thinking. You want to find new ways to sell and generate interest, new ways to sell and generate interest. I know that in our class there are a number of labs where you have to go out and try to get people interested in something. You're selling something, trying to get them to donate or whatever. And a lot of students want to do it the same old way as everybody else. What you tend to find, though, is those students and those teams that do the best not only do the same old, the way they generate interest also involves some creativity and innovation. They try something new. For example, in one of my prior classes, the students were trying to help collect cans for a pet food drive. And one student team actually went out and talked to a couple of the pet food stores in town to see if they could put a table out front and go there for an hour or something like that over the weekend. And they got a couple of no's, but they finally got a yes. And usually you don't get a yes until you get a couple of no's, and they didn't let the no's dampen their enthusiasm. And they went to this particular pet store and they put a table out front or whatever, and they actually collected quite a number of donated cans of pet food for the local animal shelter. So what they did is they were trying to ignite interest. They're trying to find new ways to sell this idea, new ways to generate interest amongst others. So that's what you want to do during this stage. You not only want to do the same thing that everybody else does to get interest, etc., but see if you can't use some creativity and innovation and come up with a new way. So under the introduction, that was the first part, some characteristics about the stage. The second part of the introduction, second of the 3 points I want to raise, during this stage, a leader's challenges are, in the textbook lists about 4 of them. 1, you want to create a culture within your organization, where people feel free and unafraid to propose and buy into new ideas and ignite creativity and enthusiastic support. You want to create a culture within your organization where people feel free and unafraid to propose and buy into new ideas to ignite the creativity and whatever, and to ignite enthusiastic support. Again, it's part of the culture. I've seen, again, just looking at student teams as opposed to organizations, and certainly they have their own cultures too, but even a small student team, say 4 or 5 members, 6 members or whatever, they tend to have a culture. And if you have a culture that let's always try to do better, let's see what we can do, and let's use our noggin to come up with something new, those teams tend to come up with something new. Well, if that happens on a team, don't you think that's going to happen with regard to any businesses that you're managing and leading, you're an executive of in the future? So again, you want to create that culture. Second point of your challenge, and it's related to it, you want to create a motivating environment. A motivating environment. There are a lot of businesses out there that, whether intentionally or not, when people come up with new ideas, when people think outside the box, they immediately throw cold water on them. They either snip or snap or whatever at the person who came up with the idea, or they criticize or make fun of or whatever. That's certainly not going to create a motivating environment for coming up with new ideas. So another leader challenge here is to create that motivating environment. Motivate people to come up with new ideas, to come up and brainstorm, and let's think outside the box, etc. The next of the leader's challenges is to create a trusting environment, and that's related, right? Let's say that I work someplace where I don't trust my colleagues. If I say something out of line, out of key, or whatever, bad things are going to happen. Whether they slap me silly right off the bat, or they're behind my back, they're saying some criticisms or whatever. That's not what I need. What I need is a trusting environment. I need an environment where if I come up with an idea, hey, listen, I got this idea for selling, for getting more contributions for cans for this pet food drive. Let's go out and let's try a couple places. I need to be able to say that and not worry, or the rest of my colleagues going to think, oh, you're crazy, I'm busy on Saturday, I don't want to do this, that, the other. So again, you want to create that trusting environment. And then related to that, the fourth and a final challenge is you want to create a judgment-free environment, judgment-free, particularly a negative judgment-free. I mean, if you're living in an environment where the judgments are always great, oh, good job, etc., I'm not so sure that's necessarily a bad thing, although at some point you start to begin to wonder how sincere that is. But nonetheless, I say you want to create a judgment-free environment, and as I say, particularly you don't want to have bad judgments. You don't want to be able to say this and all of a sudden people think horribly of you. You're being judged in a poor way. So that finishes up the third point under this introduction. I'm sorry, the second point. Let's now go to the third point. Characteristics of igniters. Characteristics of igniters. And by the way, when we talk about this, we're going to have a couple more sections coming up that are going to come back and reflect on this. Might in some cases repeat, be redundant on this. So this is a pretty important aspect of what we're talking about here. Characteristics of igniters. And under the characteristics, she has about half dozen or so. Let me give them to you. One of the characteristics, they are generators of new ideas and ways to generate interest in them. They're generators not only of new ideas, but they're also generators of ways to generate interest in those ideas. They build passion and enthusiasm. They get people thinking about things. Another characteristic of igniter is they tend to have creative energy, fresh energy. Have you ever noticed, at least in some cases, when someone's passionate, enthusiastic about something, they're really happy about something, that sometimes that can be contagious, and all of a sudden you're passionate and enthusiastic about it as well. So these are people who have creative energy. They have fresh energy. It tends to get others enthused. It tends to be catchy. It tends to inspire them to be enthusiastic about whatever they're talking about. Another characteristic of igniters, the third way, is they tend to think in novel ways. They tend to think in novel ways. Again, going back to that canned food example that I had, most students, okay, we're going to do some things on social media. We're going to contact our normal contacts and see if they want to, contribute or, with regard to it. Wonderful. Certainly want to do that. But can you think outside the box? Is there something else you can do? For example, one of my students in the past had a part-time job, was working at a pizza shop, and talked to the owner of the pizza shop, who was really into this concept of helping homeless dogs and cats and pet shelters. So they came up with a flyer, and on all the pizza boxes that went out, they put this flyer on, which was really pretty cool. They ended up getting some contributions from people who just ended up buying some pizza there. So again, they think of novel ways. Another characteristic of igniters, they challenge the status quo. They challenge the status quo. listen, I know this is the way that we always do things, and this is great. I understand that, and I'm here. I want to rock the boat a little bit. And when you talk about rocking the boat a little bit, what's a little bit? And lots of people, I don't want to rock the boat at all, but none the way they challenge the status quo. Let's go to the next of the characteristics. They tend to be somewhat risk oriented. Not necessarily we're going to jump off the bridge and all this other things, etc. But they tend to be risk oriented. They're coming up with new ideas and new ways to do things. And first off, to think outside the box, there's a little risk in that. And then to try to tell it to others and to get them to be enthusiastic, well, there's risk there too. Maybe they aren't judgment free, and maybe they aren't motivational, or at least positively motivational, etc. So there is a certain amount of risk associated. So they might be risk oriented. And then another thing, certainly they're future oriented. They're looking at new ways to do things. They're looking in the future. I know in the past this is the way we do it. I know now this is the way we do it. But in the future, maybe we should do it some other way. And then the last thing I'll mention here is they provide the spark and fuel. The spark and fuel for igniting interest and support in their ideas. They spark and fuel. Oh, look at this! Oh my gosh, that's great, etc. That we have. Let me give you a really good example, one that you probably have seen perhaps in the movies, etc. And I'm going to bring up a slide of it first, and then let me come back to that. Let me first go to a slide talking about character. As this slide shows, there's two things I want to mention, and both on the slide that you just saw, you see two links to websites, and I can't provide those in my lecture here. I got to be careful about copyrights and protect the copyrights of others. But let me talk a little bit about that. The first, you see Mission Impossible. You probably have seen some of the Mission Impossible movies that have been out there with Tom Cruise. There used to be one, maybe two different TV series called Mission Impossible a million years ago, etc. And what we saw, just generally speaking, the general theme of that is the name, Mission Impossible. We're going to do something that everybody else thinks is impossible. We're going to find a new way to do things, etc. So I think that that's part of this concept of igniters, etc. They're finding this new way, and they're enthusiastic about this new way. And as you see in Mission Impossible, they get people to help with them to, go ahead where they build a team and other things like that. The other part of that slide is you get to see a scene from The Wolf of Wall Street. The Wolf of Wall Street. And what we see in the Wolf of Wall Street, the main character there, the fellow sitting there at the desk, in that particular scene, he is a stockbroker who is out of a job, and he goes to this crummy little place to see if he can get a job. And just to kind of show people, that he can do what he can do, he gets on the phone in this scene and he tries to sell stock to, just some ordinary schmuck. He's got a phone number, just happens to call him, doesn't know this guy or whatever. And you know the drill. Usually when you get calls from people you don't know and it's a sales call, you don't even accept it, right? Let it go into voicemail or whatever. But in this particular case, the guy answers the phone. Well, then if you did answer the phone, someone trying to sell you something, you're going to turn them off, etc. And I think that would probably the same of this guy who answers the phone. But the fellow here who's trying to do the sale, he finds a way to ignite enthusiasm and passion in this potential buyer. And before you know it, by the end of this thing, the potential buyer is saying all the reasons why you should buy. He's selling himself, etc. on that. And what we saw is the original person carrying the message. The person that you see here is the one who ends up generating the enthusiasm, igniting, if you will, the enthusiasm of this potential buyer. That's what we're talking about when we talk about characteristics of igniters. Again, they provide that spark and that fuel for others. So if you haven't seen it, I certainly would suggest, watch that movie, Wolf of Wall Street, but on that slide there is a link just to a video segment on YouTube, I believe, of that one scene where he gets in there and he's able to convince this person he calls on the phone to buy this stock that we have. Well, that finishes up the first major topic, and that's the introduction. Let's now go to the second major topic, the igniter profile. The igniter profile. And the way that your author sets up the igniter profile here is the author talks initially about strengths of igniters. What are some of the things that they do that they can bring to your organization? What are some of their strengths? She then talks about the challenges of igniters. Sometimes people look at as weaknesses of igniters. If you hire someone to be an igniter on your team, what challenges do they pose to you? What can be the bad side of having an igniter? Isn't it great? I have somebody who can get people impassioned and enthusiastic, etc. Probably, but is there a bad side to it? Is there a negative side? Do they pose any challenges? And then the last of the topics that she gets into under the profile section is she talks about how do you communicate with and how do you manage igniters. And she tells you about the do's and the don'ts. Do this, but don't do that with regard to how do you manage them and what do you say to them. So let's get started and let's take a look at the strengths of igniters. And you'll notice as we go through this, a lot of the strengths of igniters are related to the characteristics that we just said. There's a little bit of a difference, but it might also tell you, not only is it being redundant, so okay, let's shut this off, it might also tell you this is important to the author. The author thinks this is important because the author's now saying it in some cases twice or a second time around a different way. Let's take a look at strengths of igniters. She lists 7, long list, I'm sorry about that. The strengths of igniters: 1, to come up with new ideas and to get people to buy into them. To come up with new ideas, and particularly with regard to igniters, to get people to buy into them. You can have a great idea, but if nobody buys into them, oftentimes the idea doesn't really go anywhere. So what you want to do is get people to buy into them. So that's certainly a strength. If someone's a good igniter, they're going to get buy-in. Another of the strengths of igniters is they're good at seeking new knowledge and also new supporters. They're good at seeking new knowledge and also new supporters. Another strength of igniters: they're not afraid to challenge themselves and challenge others. They're not afraid to challenge themselves and to challenge others. First, they have to ignite their own passion, right? They've got to challenge themselves. Can I find a new way to get people to, contribute cans, pet food for this pet food drive we have? Oh, let's challenge myself. Let's think outside the box. Oh, let's go and put something in front of a store. And even though a bunch of them tell me no initially, I'm going to find a yes, and I'm going to get this done. So they challenge themselves, and then they challenge others. In this particular team that I'm talking about that did that, the captain of the team, the leader of the team, or whatever, is I don't think the person who came up with the idea, but somebody else did on the team. And the other members of the team are saying, "Oh, geez, who's going?" They already said no at this place and that place, and we've got things to do or whatever. But what we saw here is this one particular driver on the team, with the help of the captain, was able to get support, was able to seek supporters. Oh, eventually one of the party people on the team, maybe it's not a good idea. And then somebody else maybe, etc., and built that support. Let's go to the fourth strength of igniter. They tend to be original thinkers. They come up with ideas that either nobody else thought about or nobody in their group thought about, like, hey, let's go put this table outside this pet food store. Let's go to the fifth strength of igniter. Oftentimes, they can see connections between ideas, and they're really good at being able to show those connections to others. Think about it if you're trying to get somebody on board to, buy into your idea. They might see little parts, etc., but oftentimes they don't draw the connections. There's that old saying, oh, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Well, the horse can see the parts and good things, but you're the one who have to tie all this together. Well, igniters are very good at tying things together. They tie it together in a saleable package, if you will. So they're pretty good at tying things together. The sixth strength of igniter goes to something that we did mention. They're able to create a culture where there's encouraging, people to support and promote new ideas, etc. This culture, hey, let's get together, let's try this. My guess, you probably have been on teams, whether we're talking about student teams, whether or not we're talking about sports teams, some sort of organization you're in. Maybe you're at work already with regard to it. And there are some teams, my gosh, we have that dynamic. Look at this, we do that, we can carry it, etc. And there are other teams that, we don't care. So someone who's an igniter is able to get teams to go from, we don't care, to, oh, this is a really cool idea. They create that culture. And then the seventh strength is another one we said. They have the ability, they have an uncanny ability to be able to motivate and inspire others. Motivate and inspire others. If they're impassioned about something, it doesn't mean that I am. Sometimes just seeing that they're impassioned, that might be catchy to me. Sometimes I need more persuasion than that. Oftentimes I need more persuasion than that. And igniters, they have that ability to be able to persuade, to motivate, and to inspire others. So under the igniter profile, we just finished the first of those sections, and that's to talk about the strengths of igniters. Let's now go to the second section. Challenges of igniters. Some people look at it as weaknesses of igniters. And again, do I want an igniter on my team? Yes, indeed. But if I do, is it always good, or can there be something bad, some challenge I'm going to have because I have that person who's really good at igniting others? Could there be anything wrong with that? Could there be any challenges with that? That's what this section is about. And this has 5 points associated with it. The first point, the first challenge that igniters tend to present, the first con that many igniters have, is they can become distracted with too many ideas. Oh, I like this idea, and then they like that idea, and then they like this idea, and then they like that. And the next thing you know, they like so many ideas, they're distracted, they go from one to another. And of course, when that happens, it dilutes their energy and effectiveness, and the people who they're trying to ignite, it certainly dilutes their energy and effectiveness. Let me show you another slide now to give you an idea of something you probably have seen on TV with regard to how this going after too many ideas at once and becoming distracted and diluted, etc., can come into play. Let me give you this slide right now. Well, there's another example where I'm using SpongeBob. Does that give you an indication that I've had some children in my life and we've watched more than my fair share of SpongeBob episodes? Probably, but I do like SpongeBob, and my guess is many of you have probably watched SpongeBob too, and I hope that you've enjoyed at least some of the episodes. One of the things that we saw SpongeBob do in quite a few episodes is, he was a scatterbrain, and one minute he likes this, and the next minute he likes that, and he's all over the place, etc. And this is the same concept of one of the challenges of igniters. Oh, I love this idea, and then 10 minutes later I love that idea, and 10 minutes later I love this idea and that idea, and they're all over the place. There's a buzz phrase for this with people whose attention is easily caught and misdirected or directed in different directions. And this is called, here's your buzz phrase for it, the shiny object syndrome. The shiny object syndrome. And SpongeBob here has it. One minute he's going after this butterfly, and the next minute he's going after that one, and the next minute he's doing this, and the next minute he's doing that. What you're doing is that a shiny object has caught your attention, and you go for that, and before you know it, some other shiny object catches your attention, and you go for it. Think about this. One of the things that you find that leads to the success of Walmart and other stores like that, but particularly Walmart, a good example. There's a lot of reasons for Walmart's success, but one is, think about this. You go to Walmart, and let's say you want to buy one thing. You go in, I gotta buy, a can of juice or something like that, or a bottle of this or that, and you go in to buy that. But by the time you leave Walmart, have you bought anything else? Probably. Even when you're in the checkout line, if that's all you have, You're looking at the checkout line. Look at all the stuff that they have around you as you're standing there waiting to check out, right? They're trying to have a shiny object to catch your attention. Oh, hey, we know that you came in to buy that shirt, but now that you have that shirt, why don't you look at this and why don't you look at that, etc. And oftentimes they'll take some of the departments where there's lots of sales, and they put those departments way in the back of the store. Why? It's not because they want to make it inconvenient for most of their buyers who are going to buy that. They want most of their buyers who are going to buy it to walk past all this other merchandise on the way there, and then on the way back to the cash register to walk by that merchandise again. Maybe the shiny object will catch your attention and maybe you'll buy something else. Well, that's what we're talking about here is a challenge of igniters. If they're all over the board, if they're easily swayed, etc., if they're, as I said earlier, scatterbrained or whatever, it's hard for them to, have the energy and effectiveness necessary to get done with the one thing because they've now diluted their energy and effectiveness. Well, if it's hard for them, it's going to be hard for people who might be interested. Those people they're trying to generate enthusiasm with. Oh, great, you love that. Okay, what do you mean now you like this? Oh, you like that? You like that? All of a sudden, it's hard to get me to be enthusiastic about something because, again, you're all over the board. You're not only diluting your energy and your effectiveness, you're diluting mine. So there's one of the challenges. Let's take a look at another challenge that we have here. Another problem they have is, think about this, someone who is enthusiastic and impassioned, coming up with these new ideas. Oh, let's go and let's put out the table at the store, another way to try and generate interest and enthusiasm. Sometimes they're really good at not only selling us on their idea, they sell themselves on their idea. In fact, they sell it so much, so hard to themselves, they become such a believer in their idea themselves that they lose sight of the concept of, is it feasible? Is this a good idea? Does it really fit? It doesn't matter to them now because they have sold themselves. Not only are they trying to sell you, they've sold themselves. And sometimes that means that they lose the broader picture, the concept. Is this a good idea? Does it fit? Is it feasible? Is it practical, etc. like that? Someone who is a dreamer oftentimes doesn't look at practicality very often. Let's go to the next challenge of igniters. Sometimes they act without thinking. Oh, think about that. I'm sure you've never done that, act without thinking. Sometimes you become so impassioned on something, you just drive right into it. I know, for example, for summer vacations, when my wife and I would take our sons to the beach, it's usually, we don't live close to a beach, so usually it's a vacation where we're going away for a week or something, and it's a fairly long drive. I suppose we could fly there as well. It takes some time to get there, and once you get there, you got to dump all your stuff in a hotel room and check in and all that other stuff. And then, of course, after you're doing that, the little kids, oh, they can't wait. Let's go to the beach, etc. So you get all dressed, etc. And you're in your swim suits and all this other stuff, and you got your towels and chairs and sunscreen and all that other stuff, and you rush off to the beach, and you get there, and before you know it, you aren't even setting up your chairs. That two kids that we have, they're running down and jump right into the water. Okay, understand regarding that, fully understand. They're acting without thinking. They're running into the water. Is the water cold? Are there crabs? Are there jellyfish? They don't care. They just they leap into the water without looking. Leaping before you look or whatever. That can also be a problem, a challenge you have with igniters. They are so impassioned with their idea. Sometimes they will jump into the water without looking. Is it deep? Is it cold? Is there a shark right there or something like that? So another problem, again, sometimes acting without thinking. Let's go to the fourth challenge. The fourth challenge is igniters are really good at generating ideas, particularly generating ideas of how to sell things and be enthusiastic or whatever, and selling you. And they're really good at that. They've got this passion for it. But another problem that an igniter has is sometimes they don't follow through with it. They start it, oh yeah, great idea. But maybe with the shiny object syndrome or whatever, they stop and they might do something else. I know that I have a brother-in-law who is really good and has a passion about fixing cars and automobiles and motor vehicles, etc. And he'll go out and he'll buy some broken down cars or whatever and bring them back, and he's going to fix them up, and he does a great job. He knows things inside and out, and he's very creative in thinking about things. But one of the things that you tend to see is his house, his back of his house. He normally doesn't have one car back there that he's working on. He usually has two or three, and eventually his wife is going nuts. Oh my God, we can't get any more. The kids can't play. You got all these old cars back there, etc. So another problem that you sometimes find with igniters is they come up with a good idea. They just don't follow through with it. So there's an interesting issue and an interesting problem. And then related to that, the fifth and the final challenge of igniters is sometimes they're not able to harvest their ideas. They have this creative energy, etc., and we're going to do this, that, and the other. But they go out and they plant all the seeds, but they don't water the seeds, they don't put down fertilizer, they don't check it, throughout the summer or whatever. And then all of a sudden it comes harvest time in the fall and nothing's happened because, well, the birds ate the seeds or we had a drought or whatever it could be. So sometimes they have this creative energy to plant the seeds to get you interested in something, but they don't harvest what they plant. So those are the challenges under the igniter. So now under the profile, we've looked at two of the three topics. We looked at strengths of igniters. We looked at challenges, weaknesses of igniters. Let's go to the third and final point under the igniter profile, and that is your author gives you some thoughts about how do you communicate and manage igniters. What are some of the things you do? What are some of the things that you shouldn't do as you communicate with and you manage these people who are enthusiastic and try to get other people to buy into the idea? How do you manage them? You want them. How do you manage them? What do you say to them? What don't you say? What do you do and what don't you do? This is what she's talking about. So let's start off with regard to the do's. And she has 4 do's on her list. With regard to how you manage and communicate with them, you want to encourage them to talk about their ideas, lots of ideas. Talk about it, tell me about it. You want to encourage them and not just talk to me about it, talk with others about it. We're trying to get others impassioned by it, etc. So you want to encourage them, and particularly talk to others. Talk to me, talk to others with regard to this. Another do is you want to build on their ideas. They come to you with this, what they think is a really great idea, and at least in part, you think, yeah, that's true. So they come to you with ideas. There's something you can do. Maybe the idea itself, staying by itself all alone, doesn't really attract you very much. But you can see how if I take this idea and I combine it with that idea, and maybe this over here and that, I can build on this, and we can really turn this into something big. So another of the do's that you want to have is you want to be able to build on their ideas. If they come up to you with an idea, how can you build on it? In fact, how can you use it? Can we use it? How can we do it? So you want to build on their ideas. Another do, this is a third of 4, is you want to involve them in brainstorming. And that includes brainstorming the original idea, etc., and then brainstorming on how are we going to sell it. If you've taken any classes in organizational behavior and human relations, etc., even in psychology and sociology, you probably have run across the concept that if people participate in decision making, if they participate in the conversations and communications and developing ideas, etc., if they participate in that, if they're engaged, they tend to be more motivated. If they participate in it, if they're engaged, they tend to be more motivated. Doesn't mean they're always motivated, doesn't mean they're greatly motivated, but you'll find that they're more motivated if they're participate in and they're engaged in. I find that, for example, with regard to my students. If I just sit there, and unfortunately, as I have to do in the lecture video, and just talk to them and don't engage them, like I can't really engage you. I can't say, slap my hand or stand up and do this. I can't really do that. But in the classroom, I do. And one of the reasons I do that is I find that if I engage them, not only do I have their attention, but oftentimes they start to buy into the ideas and they get enthusiastic about learning and they ask this question and that question or whatever like that. So again, this concept of involving your igniters and brainstorming is great because it goes to this concept, here's a buzz phrase for you, of participative management. Participative management. And what we're going to do is we're going to get them to participate in the brainstorming, etc. Because as we do that, maybe they'll really buy into the idea. They're already bought into part of it. That's the thing they're selling. But maybe also by having them part of this, they can have even more motivation. And maybe you've had to tweak something they said. And they're, geez, I liked it this way. And why did you have to go ahead and do that? Well, now as they're part of the participation, as they're engaged in this decision-making process, maybe even though you've changed your idea just a little bit, maybe because they participated in that, helped you to tweak it this way and that way, maybe they'll be more motivated in it. And then the last do that was mentioned here by the author, the last do is you want to encourage them to talk about opportunities and possibilities. As you talk with them, you want to talk about opportunities and possibilities. If you limit these people to only talking about probabilities, only talking about what's happened in the past and what's not possible in the future, what was probable in the past and what's not possible in the future, all of a sudden now you've really limited them. You're not managing them very well. For example, with regard to that team, again, thinking about, let's put a table outside a pet store or whatever. If I went and I told them, hey, listen, I only want you to look on what's been done before. This is probable because it's occurred before. They wouldn't have looked at this possibility. They wouldn't have thought of it. They wouldn't have engaged in it. Oh, Fogarty doesn't want that. We're going over here. Well, no. If you want to manage someone who's an igniter, you want to talk about opportunities and possibilities, not just talk about probable things because this is what's happened in the past. Let's now flip the page and let's go to things that the author says you shouldn't do. You shouldn't say, you shouldn't do, etc., the don'ts of it. She has a list of 5 don'ts, 4 do's and 5 don'ts. Let's take a look at the don'ts. The first, don't be dismissive of their ideas and tell them it can't work. Don't be dismissive of their ideas and tell them they cannot work. If you have someone who's creating these new ideas, hey, this is a new way to sell things, let's go put this table outside the pet food place or whatever. If you're dismissive of ideas like that and tell them they don't work, not only have you lost out on that particular idea and a way to sell it, but overall you're getting these people who are coming up with the ideas like, I don't want to say anything. If I give you a new idea, you got to shoot it down. I don't want to be shot down. Either going to be quiet here or I'm going to go get a job over there, etc. So again, don't be dismissive of ideas and say they cannot work. Second thing, you don't want to be a nitpicker. You don't want to deconstruct their ideas too quickly. Oh, you gave me this idea, but what about this and what about this? You got to do this. Da, 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 da. You don't want to be a nitpicker, at least initially, right? Now maybe as you start to implement the ideas, etc., you got to start looking more at the details, right? Because these dreamers, etc., they think of the broad picture, and then when you start looking at the details, the devil's in the details. But if you nitpick their ideas from the very beginning, once again, it's going to be a turnoff for them. It's not going to encourage them, and they're certainly not going to go out and encourage others. Another of the don'ts is you really don't want to get them too involved in the details. These are people who generally operate by looking at broad strokes, the concepts, etc. of this. They tend to be more generalists. If you bog them down in the details, which somebody in the organization has to get involved in the details, but they're not necessarily the ones to do that. If you get them bogged down in details and, oh, hey, listen, to do that idea, in fact, a lot of bureaucratic companies do this, to do that idea, you first have to write this paper and do all this research, etc., and you've got to answer these 10 questions or whatever, and then you have to go and you have to present it to this committee and that committee, and you have to defend it, and then you have to revise it, etc., and, they have to look at all the details and address all this stuff. Do you really think that generates much enthusiasm on their part? I know, for example, I work at a large university, and it's very bureaucratic. And occasionally I've come up with an idea, let's try this, let's do this as a department, as a college, as a university or whatever. And once I do that, they inundate me with, go out and do research on the details. I don't want to do research on the details. That's for somebody else. With regard to this, I'm trying to come up with new ideas for you. If all you're worried about is, every I has to be dotted and every T has to be crossed, which I guess eventually it has to be. But this stage, and also, I'm not the right person. I'm not the right person to do this. Somebody in your organization should probably do that, but not the igniter. The igniter, again, is looking to broad strokes, etc. If they have to get involved in the details, they're probably not going to be all that motivated about it. The heck with it. Last time I came to an idea, I had to do 10,000 things, and you didn't like any of them anyway, and I had to accept, I'm not doing that. So you don't want to get them too involved with the details, particularly early on. Another thing you don't want to do is you don't want to be looking over their shoulders all the time. You don't want to be monitoring their every move. Think about this. Maybe as you grew up, you had a parent or parents who watched you like a hawk and monitored your every move. Maybe when you got into school, you had a teacher that monitored your every move. Maybe in a workplace, you had some boss or whatever that monitored your every. If someone's checking you every second of every day and monitoring you, is that going to encourage you to, think broadly and try to come up with new ideas of how to sell this to other people, how to get them engaged and encouraged? Probably not. So what you want to do is give them some freedom, some latitude. No, I don't want you to go out and burn down the building or whatever. But on the other hand, some latitude, some freedom is going to be helpful. And the last of the don'ts mentioned by the author is don't ask them to do routine work. Again, these are creative people. These are people who are trying to ignite passion and enthusiasm and support in others. And, if they're involved in mundane, routine work or whatever, it's going to drive them nuts. They're dreamers, right? Dreamers want to think of a broader picture. They want to think about things that nobody else has thought about. They don't want to do the mundane and the everyday. So be careful about that. Another thing not to do is don't ask them to do routine work. They're not made to do that. There are some people who love routine work, and there are some people who don't. Igniters generally are those people who don't. That finishes up the second topic, and that was the profile, the strengths and the weaknesses and how to manage or whatever. Let's now go to the third of the four major topics under this chapter. This third topic is the Ignite skills. The Ignite skills. And the author lists about 6 of them. And again, some of these we've heard before. Should you just turn off and say, I'm not listening, Fogarty, I'm going to speed up? No, probably not. Because if the author's saying this now for the second, maybe the third time, it must be important. The author has other things to do and doesn't want to waste her time writing about something 3 times. Doesn't want to waste her audience's time either. So it must be important. So let's take a look at these Ignite skills. See if you see them related to the characteristics of igniters and strengths of igniters. The first of these, an Ignite skill, is being able to generate lots of options and possibilities and enthusiasm for that. Generate lots of options and possibilities and enthusiasm for that. These people, igniters, their skill is they're able to sell others on an idea, sell others on a concept. They're able to get you interested and motivated, etc., impassioned, if you will. So they have that skill of, generating options and possibilities, but particularly the skill of getting enthusiasm for those ideas. Let's take a look at the second Ignite skill. They're very good at challenging assumptions. Challenging assumptions. Yes, I know that no one's ever gone out and put a table at these places. I know 2 or 3 places already knocked us down outside the pet food store saying, you can't do that. And, you could be there all day, no one's going to give and all this other stuff. Nonetheless, the people on that team that I just mentioned, particularly the fellow who came up with the idea, and then the leader who eventually said, or I should say pretty quickly said, great idea, etc., they challenge assumptions. Let me give you my third and final slide for this to kind of show you that. And I want to talk a little bit about that. So let me give you that slide. So what we see in this slide, there was a movie that was made called The Pirates of Silicon Valley. The Pirates of Silicon Valley. And this movie is about how Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak started Apple, and how Bill Gates and Paul Allen and a guy named Ballmer, Steve Ballmer, I think it was, started Microsoft. And it's a fairly accurate movie. It's a good movie to watch. If you have an interest in entrepreneurship, if you have an interest in people who are creative and innovators or something, not a bad idea to take a look at this movie. As I say, it's not a bad movie. It's actually fairly good. Most of my students like it. In that movie, there's a scene of something that really happened in life. And this goes to this concept of challenging assumptions. The scene that you see there is the character who's playing Steve Wozniak in the movie is at a desk in the office of one of the top executives of Hewlett-Packard, of HP, a large, well-established tech company back then. Apple hadn't really even started. And Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs came up with what was going to eventually be the Apple I, the first Apple. They put together a prototype of it. It's that wooden box you see there. It's got electronics in it, but it's a wooden box. It doesn't look very attractive, etc. And Wozniak is talking to this executive of HP. And the reason he's doing that is Woz, as a student, had been an intern at HP and had signed, as a part of the employment agreement or whatever, a provision that said to HP, if I come up with any new ideas, etc., you get the first right of refusal to them. Now, generally speaking, a college intern's probably not going to come up with a lot of great new ideas, but yet it might. So HP was smart enough to put that into their employment agreements and even have their college interns sign it, such as Wozniak. So here Wozniak, along with Jobs, comes up with this idea for what eventually turns out to be, the first mass-produced desktop computer. Prior to that, all the computers, generally speaking, had been mainframe computers. They're huge computers, and you go into, go into a building or whatever, and the computer room, it was just filled with all these computers, huge computers, bigger than the sizes of refrigerators, and this room is filled with them, and there's lights blinking and buzzing and humming from the electricity and all this other stuff. And they cost millions of dollars, and this is even back in the 60s and early 70s or whatever. They cost millions of dollars. Really hard to work. You had to be a computer engineer to figure out what to do. A simple print command, would drive you nuts, and you had all sorts of computer cards. You had to punch holes in and put into a deck, and then the computer read the cards and did it was awful, right? And what the computers back then did, frankly, your smartphone in your hand does more stuff than those computers did. So he goes to HP and he's talking to this executive. Okay, we've come up with this new computer, this new desktop or whatever. And I've got to give you the first right of refusal, under this agreement. So do you want it or not? Because if you don't want it, we're going to keep it. We're going to, try to sell them, make them, or whatever. And the HP executive, or executives that were in that office, but particularly in this scene, the executive you see, looks at Woz, looks at the box, and goes back to Woz and says, Steve, it's Steve, isn't it? Yeah. He said, why on earth would an ordinary person want a computer? Why on earth would an ordinary person want a computer? So HP turned it down and said, Steve, you keep it, etc. You've got the computer. Well, a couple of thoughts there. First off, had that HP executive decided otherwise, oh no, we want it, etc., we may never have had Apple Computer. And look at all the things that Apple's done since it started sometime in the mid-70s or whatever. We might never have had it because its first product would have been taken over by HP. And also HP, what could have happened to HP if all of a sudden HP was the first company to have this, what would be the first mass-produced desktop computer, or one of the first. It could have changed. So you ask, gosh, this executive, or the executive's there, but in this particular scene is one executive. What type of idiot was he? Well, he made the decision based on assumptions. What occurred in the past is going to continue to occur and is going to occur in the future. What occurred in the past was this mainframe computers, billions of dollars and millions of dollars, billions to right today, too hard for an ordinary person, doesn't do anything, that takes up rooms full. So no ordinary person in the world will want to have or could afford or anything a mainframe computer. So he's looking at this thing and he made the assumption, well, ordinary people can't run computers, it's no good, etc. So you can have it. Well, what we saw is Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, of course, they took the ideas and they ran with it. It was their idea anyway, and they now don't have to worry about HP or anybody else taking the idea, at least initially. So they run with it. So what we saw with regard to Jobs and Wozniak is we saw that they challenged assumptions. Yes, we know how things worked in the past, but by God, we have an idea of how things can be different in the future. They challenged assumptions. So it ignites skill. Certainly, you'd have to argue that particularly Steve Jobs, and Wozniak probably to some degree, but particularly Steve Jobs was an igniter. Look at this great new idea and what we're going to do and all this other stuff, and we've got lots of buy-in, lots of passion and enthusiasm, not only by potential customers, but also by suppliers and workers and financiers and everything else like that. Let's take a look at another Ignite skill. They see how ideas can be combined and connected into a sellable package, a sellable, likable package. Oh, look at this. If you do this, that, and the other, look at what you can do. And they're able to put together in a good sellable package. When those students went in front of the pet store, they not only stood there and say, hey, give us some money as you're walking out the door, or, give us some cans or whatever as you're walking out the door. They put together a nice table and had a tablecloth, and then they put some displays on it. Behind it, they had some posters they made, some other things like that. They were able to bring everything together in a likable package, and included they had pictures of the dogs and the cats at the animal shelter we wanted to help and stuff like that. They were able to pull it together into a sellable and likable package, and they collected quite a lot of cans of pet food during 2 hours or whatever that they were there. So let's go now to the third of the Ignite skills. Igniters tend to be broad-minded. They're not narrow-focused. They look at the whole picture. They try to pull things together, and again, they're just not looking at what has happened. They're looking at what could happen, etc. So they're broad-minded. Another skill is they're able to motivate others to buy into and contribute to their ideas. What can we do? How can we make this better? And don't you want to buy in, etc. They're very good at motivating others. And then another skill is they're able to build culture, in their organizations, and build a culture where people want to help them with their ideas, come up with new ideas, or people want to be sellers too, etc. There's this freedom of expression. I can come up with these ideas and I won't be slapped silly, etc. that we have. So those are some of the skills that are mentioned by the author. The only other thing I'll mention here is, in your textbook, there are certain parts of your textbook that I generally don't lecture on. It doesn't mean that the parts aren't important and aren't good. It's just I don't have that much time. One of the things you want to do is you want to take a look at the graph on page 59 of your textbook, on page 59, and you want to look at the sections in your textbook called Tools and Activities. Tools and Activities. I oftentimes can get some great questions for quizzes off that. They also have some really good stuff in there if you want to be an innovative and creative type of person, if you want to manage an organization where the people are innovative and creative, you want to take a look at Tools and Activities. Well, let's go to the fourth and the final major topic for the lecture today, and that's called the Ignite Mindset. The Ignite Mindset. Mindset's certainly kind of a buzzword in here. We talked about it a couple prior classes. It's not just how you feel on a certain day. It's kind of what your character is, your attitude, and kind of flows through you. It's kind of part of you. And your mindset might change a little bit from day to day or whatever, but most people, their mindset is there for a while. It could be weeks and months and years and maybe their whole lifetime. But mindset is not, oh, today I feel like this and tomorrow I feel like that. Mindset tends to be something a little bit more. Well, with regard to the Ignite Mindset, your author mentions basically two things, maybe three. The first thing talks about, and involves a buzz phrase. Our world today, our world of education, our world of business, etc., our world of people, we tend to promote what's called, here's a buzz phrase for you, left brain thinking. Left brain thinking. The concept is there's parts of your brain that do different types of thinking, and the concept here, whether it's true or not, talk to somebody who's a doctor or whatever, but when it's true, is that the left side of your brain is the more rational side. It thinks about words and time, thinks about self-control, it thinks about logic and language, etc. It's factual, it's that part of your brain that you go down, you're taking the SAT exam and you're answering questions about math and science or whatever. Left side of your brain is the one that's really going nuts. The interesting thing, though, is so many problems today require people to think outside the box. The left side of the brain kind of is the box. And to answer so many of today's new problems and new situations, oftentimes you have to be a creative thinker, a creative decision maker, creative problem solver. You have to be innovative and come up with some new things. And creative problem solving oftentimes requires the use of not just the left side to some degree, but mainly includes the right side of your brain. So today, creative problem solving requires, and to be an igniter, your mindset requires a lot of right brain thinking. There's another buzz phrase for you, right brain thinking. Right brain thinking tends to be more creative. It tends to look at things as patterns and shapes and geometric designs or whatever. It looks at faces. It looks at emotional expression. It looks at intuition. It looks at body language and nonverbal language and things like that. It looks at pictures and creates pictures and things like that. Right brain thinking. So one of the things that she's saying here is that the mindset of someone who is a good igniter is usually someone who has a lot of right brain thinking. Doesn't mean you shut off the left brain. Doesn't mean that you're not logical and you don't use facts or whatever. But it does mean that you use a lot of creativity, a lot of looking at shapes and concepts and dreams and visions and whatever. And that tends to require the use of right brain thinking, probably in combination with left brain, but a lot of right brain thinking. And if you think about it, this concept of right brain thinking tends to be a little bit more emotional. And isn't passion related to emotion? And if you're trying to inspire others, aren't you impassioned and enthusiastic? Don't you find that probably we're involving that right brain thinking with regard to selling these ideas as well? Well, that finishes what I want to talk about in this chapter on Ignite. Igniters sometimes come up with the ideas, but a clear aspect of this Ignite stage is someone who sees the idea and is able to sell it to others, not just to get them to buy the product, not get them to invest money in the product, but to invest enthusiasm, to invest their time in the product, their support in the product, etc., to buy into the product in more ways than, here's my credit card, let me buy that new gizmo you just came out with. And if you think about it, if you come up with new ideas, if you're creative and innovative, usually you have to have other people supporting your idea. They should like your idea, they want to help your idea, etc. They want to buy your idea, whatever it might be. So what we find is igniters aren't just the ones, sometimes they do ignite and come up with new ideas. Sometimes they do that innovative part that we talked about in our last eye when we looked at that. But the ignite skill is, now that I have this idea, first off, can I ignite my passion and enthusiasm? And then second, can I ignite yours? Well, that finishes up the topic. I hope you enjoyed the lecture. If you have any questions, certainly let me know. Next lecture up, we'll go to the next eye, the third eye that we have. So hope you enjoyed the lecture. Hope you have a great day coming up. If you have any questions whatsoever, don't hesitate to let me know. Hope you have a great day. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.